Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's session of the Accompanying Data and Documents training session within MWMA. I see we have a few more people joining here, so we're going to go ahead and cover some tips and tricks for this Zoom webinar to hopefully ensure that it runs smoothly before we go ahead and jump into the content. So if you are currently hearing me, then you should be connected to audio just fine. But if not, there are some instructions in the left corner of this screen that should instruct you on how you can switch to phone audio. So be sure to do that if you're having any issues with your audio at the moment. Also, throughout the webinar, I'm sure you will have questions. Keep in mind that we're going to have a Q&A session towards the end of this training session where we'll be able to answer any questions you may have throughout, but also feel free to type some questions in the Q&A box if they do come up throughout the webinar, and we'll try to address those either live throughout the session or at the end during that Q&A session. Be sure to just limit these messages in the Q&A function to questions only, and do not put those in the chat box, please. If you do have any issues with Zoom itself, please be sure to just use the chat function at that point to message one of the panelists, and hopefully we can help you get that all sorted out. One last little tip is to please be sure you're using Chrome, Firefox, or Edge. Internet Explorer is often not supported, and we do sometimes experience issues with that. So please just be sure to use one of those other internet browsers. So like I said, thanks so much for joining us for today's ADD training. Just a quick review of why we are here. We wanted to provide a refresher training on the accompanying data and documents functionality for you all within MWMA. Just a quick note that there have been no changes made to the ADD functionality in MWMA, and this is specifically just a refresher training. And by the end of this session, just a few goals. We want to help you feel comfortable entering any accompanying data and documents within MWMA. We also really want you to understand which documents are going to be required for each specific waiver program. So as we work through the content today, just please be sure to keep those in mind, and also keep in mind that this is a refresher training and no changes have been made to the ADD functionality that you are used to. A few more housekeeping items before we jump into today's content. Like I mentioned before, please be sure to use the Q&A functionality to ask any questions that you may have that come up throughout the training. The chat function is specifically just for addressing any issues you may be facing with Zoom, so please be sure to post all of your questions within the Q&A functionality. And a few more objectives throughout this webinar. We're just going to provide you all with a brief overview of how that ADD functionality works within MWMA as a quick review. We also want you to be able to understand if and when you're able to view, edit, or enter any new information into these accompanying data and documents. And finally, by the end of this webinar, we hope successful participants will have sufficient knowledge as to how to enter the necessary documents into ADD within MWMA. Just a quick note before we jump into this content today, we are going to have a post-training evaluation for you guys. It's a very brief, about 5-minute survey, and that'll just help you all provide some feedback for us so that we can really acknowledge where we did well and where we could improve our content that we provided. So if you wouldn't mind to just take a few minutes to fill that survey out towards the end today. My co-host is going to post that in the chat, and we would really appreciate any feedback that you could provide so we can improve trainings in the future. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with today's ADD content. Just a quick agenda before we jump in. We're going to do a quick review of the accompanying data and documents and what exactly that is within MWMA. We're going to take a look at how you can access the accompanying data and documents in MWMA. And then we're going to look specifically at each document that is part of the ADD functionality within MWMA, so you can get an idea of what each document is. And then we're going to look at some additional functionality and notifications that you may see when completing and entering accompanying data and documents. Finally, we'll do that Q&A session that I mentioned where we can address all the questions that you guys ask throughout the session and any additional questions that may come up, and then we'll close things out for the day. All right, so let's take a look at why are the accompanying data and documents necessary. So ADD essentially enables users to enter a bunch of basic info and personal preferences related to a specific individual's needs and situations. So it's helpful to think of it as an individual's profile, and all the information that you all enter into those documents helps create a more personalized level of care for that individual. And that is kind of why these ADD documents are submitted in conjunction with an individual's plan of care. All the information that you guys enter into these documents is going to help to provide the individual receive a better plan of care. It's also going to help the selection process and approval process for the different services they receive and providers as well. And just keep in mind that every plan of care must have at least one ADD record within the range of the plan dates that you enter. You will not be able to submit an individual's plan until all of the required ADD documents for that specific waiver program have been submitted. Next, we're going to look at when you should be entering the accompanying data and documents. So it's really best to enter them anytime after the individual receives the case manager assignment. So you'll not be able to enter any ADD documents until that individual has been assigned to a specific case manager. And just a few quick notes, please pay attention to these. If there's no plan of care that exists already, you may enter the ADD for any date range. However, you may not submit the plan of care unless the dates of the accompanying data and documents align with that specific plan start and end date that you entered. Second, if you're going to perform a reassessment on that plan of care, the accompanying data and documents cannot be added for future dates until the level of care is met and the plan of care is created. So, however, you may enter accompanying data and documents for an existing plan of care. And as far as when to enter accompanying data and documents, we're going to look at more specific ADD requirements here in the next few slides, so you know which requirements, which documents are required for each specific waiver program. And as we work through the more specific content today, just keep in mind a few of these different notes. Once again, pay close attention to the specific ADD requirements for each waiver program. We're going to pull those up on the next slide, but we do want to note that we recognize that the required documents and information is very person and individual centered, and it's going to vary a lot depending on the specific waiver program and the situation of that waiver participant themselves. If you need any additional resources, you can access the approved CMS waiver application by specific waiver program here at this link, and we will be sure to send out this slideshow following today's session so that you'll have access to that link as well as all the information that we covered today. And if you have any more specific questions as to specific documents that are required by a waiver program, please contact your QA or operating agency following today's session or when any questions may come up in the future about those specific documents. Next, due to time constraints today, we're just going to cover the basic workflow of the accompanying data and documents sections and functionality. So please try to save any waiver specific or scenario-based questions for the Q&A session that I mentioned before, or contact your QA or operating agency to ask them in the future. Finally, please take advantage of the following training resources. If you are still struggling with the ADD functionality following this session, there is a QRG that helps with the understanding of the accompanying data and documents functionality that will be very useful to you all, and that is going to be located on TRIS. And also, like I mentioned, we're going to be posting this slide deck for you all to take advantage of, as well as a recording of this webinar. So hopefully you can review that in the future if any questions do arise. All right, so let's look at some specific ADD requirements. I'm not going to go through the specifics for each waiver program, but please take a look at those yourselves. But do note that the crisis prevention and risk mitigation document, as well as the medical information document, are mandatory for all waiver programs. And you can see in the table below the other mandatory documents by program. Keep in mind that there's going to be other necessary documents depending on the specific waiver program, and you can see those in some of those resources that we will provide later. A quick example for you all, we know that for SEL providers, a participant summary is required, and if all the required information in the participant summary that you all are asked to fill out is included when you fill out these ADD documents, then that is able to take the place of the participant summary. So that's just a quick example of something that you would be reaching out to your QA or operating agency about as to when specific documents are going to be required. If you have any further questions about this, we'd be happy to answer those towards the end during our Q&A session. So let's take a look at who has access to the accompanying data and documents within MWMA. So as you can see in this table here, you all, the case managers and case supervisors, are going to have access to both view and edit these documents within MWMA. And furthermore, direct service providers and direct service provider supervisors are going to have access to view these documents, but they will not be able to edit them within MWMA. With that being said, let's take a look at how you actually go about accessing the accompanying data and documents. So there's going to be two main ways that you can access them. One is going to be on the individual summary screen, and one is going to be using the quick launch functionality within MWMA. Let's take a quick look at what those will look like more specifically. So the first way to access it is going to be initiating a quick search. As you're familiar with, you can enter any combination of identifying information for an individual and go ahead and click search there. You'll see their individual summary screen pop up. And if you look on the right-hand side under the case action column, you will see that accompanying data and documents button that you can click, and it should direct you to this individual data entry main menu screen. And on this screen, you're able to review all of the accompanying data and documents at any time. And on the screen, you'll also see that quick launch functionality that I mentioned. So anytime you're on an individual's profile, there's going to be that quick launch functionality in the top right-hand corner. And if you click that, you'll see this drop-down menu over here on the right side pop up that looks very similar to the column we saw on the last screen. And you'll also see an accompanying data and documents button on that screen that you can click to access this individual data entry main menu screen. We'll go ahead and move forward and take a look at the specific accompanying data and document types themselves. So like you saw on that last screen on the main menu, there are four main documents. That is going to be the crisis prevention and risk mitigation document, transition plan document, the individual narrative, and the medical information document. Let's take a closer look at what each one of these documents entails. And first, we're going to do a review of the crisis prevention and risk mitigation document. As we work our way through the different workflows of these documents, we're going to have some characters that just help you follow along. They all represent different case managers filling out these specific documents. So hopefully it'll just make it a little bit easier for you guys to keep track of what data you must enter and at what time. So with this first document, we're going to have Julia. She's a case manager, and she is just ready to complete this crisis prevention and risk mitigation document. She's on that individual data entry main menu screen, and she's ready to begin. So she's going to click add on the right-hand side of that screen. And Julia's going to see a pop-up window asking her to enter the effective from and the effective to dates for this document. These dates are essentially just going to provide a timeline of how long this specific ADD document is going to be valid for. So just keep in mind as we work through every document, you will see this pop-up window come up, and these dates must also fall within the level of care and plan of care effective dates that you have previously entered. She enters those dates and goes ahead and clicks continue, and that gets her started with this crisis prevention and risk mitigation document. So Julia is going to see this first adjudication status screen, and in order to begin on each different screen of the document, she's going to have to click add to enter any information necessary. But also you can see up top here, there is a not adjudicated checkbox. So if Julia does not have any adjudication information for that specific individual, rather than clicking add, Julia is just going to simply check that checkbox and proceed with this document. So we'll pretend Julia's entered all the necessary information about this individual's adjudication status, and she is ready to click continue. And once she has done so, she can see that summarized here, still on the adjudication status screen. But at this point, she can see that her submission has been inputted into the adjudication status, and she can also add, edit, or delete any of the adjudication information on this screen before she proceeds. So each screen of each one of the documents is going to look very similar to this, with similar options to add, edit, or delete the information if need be. So Julia's completed that. She's going to go ahead and click continue to proceed. And next screen she sees is going to be the emergency contact screen. Once again, she clicks add and can enter any information about the emergency contacts for the individual. But really what I want to point out on the screen is going to be that red text at the top under the crisis prevention risk mitigation document headline. So that says that any changes made to the screen need to be manually updated in the transition plan document. So you'll see different areas throughout this training on the different screens where information overlaps between documents. And according to that notification there, when you make any changes on this document, you must also go back and manually update in the other document. So we'll point these out as we go, but please just keep in mind that when information is changed on one of these ADD documents, you must also go back and manually change it in the other one. So Julia's entered her emergency contact information. She's going to go ahead and click continue. And next is going to be the allergy screen, very similar to the emergency contacts and the screen we saw before, but she's going to have the chance to enter any allergy information she has about the individual. And if they do not have any allergies, she can go ahead and click that no known allergy checkbox there at the top. Once again, you can see here that there's a red notification letting Julia know that any changes made on the screen to the allergy information are going to need to be manually updated in the medical information document. So it points out very specifically which document you need to reevaluate to be sure that all of the information aligns between different ADD documents. Julia's going to go ahead and click continue. And next, she's got the rights restriction screen. She's going to enter any rights restrictions as well as the dates that those specific restrictions apply for the individual. If not, she can click that no rights restrictions checkbox at the top and proceed forward. Next, she's going to see this any potential crisis issues screen where she can once again fill out similar information to what she did before. And next, Julia is going to see the behavioral support plan screen. This is the final screen in this crisis prevention and risk mitigation document. And she must record if there's a behavioral support plan in place for this specific individual. So in this case, Julia did click yes, and this is the screen that you see here. But please note that if she clicks no, there is going to be a box where she must explain why there is no behavioral support plan in place for this specific individual. So once Julia enters all of the necessary information for not only this behavioral support plan, but for the entire crisis prevention and risk mitigation document, she's going to click continue. And once she's completed all of the necessary information, she can see that it has been submitted on this individual data entry main menu screen that she was brought back to. So as you can see here, there's a submission date as to when Julia uploaded this specific document. You can see the effective periods that she entered at the beginning of the document, as well as the update, add, edit, and print functionalities on this screen that she can take advantage of if she needs to. We'll go ahead and move forward onto the next document, and that's going to be the transition plan. For this example, we're going to have Tom, and he's also a case manager. He's ready to complete this transition plan document. So he's going to click Add, go ahead and enter the effective from and to dates, and then click Continue. And first, Tom's going to see the diagnosis screen. You must enter any information about that specific individual and any diagnoses that were made about that individual. Tom enters that information. He's going to click Continue. And next, Tom needs to enter the plans for any long-term needs of that specific individual. And the next couple screens are going to go along with this long-term needs screen. As you can see, there's going to be quite a few different questions to set up a plan for this individual and their specific long-term needs. And next, once Tom has submitted the long-term needs, he's going to see this emergency contact information screen. We previously saw this in the last document, the crisis prevention and risk mitigation. And at this point, you can start to see how the information overlaps across several of the documents. So in this case, any changes, it lets Tom know that any changes he makes to the emergency contact information that's already in there, he's going to need to go back and update that in the crisis prevention and risk mitigation document that we completed before. He'll click Continue since he didn't make any changes here. And that's going to be the last page of that transition plan document. So he can see once again that it has been submitted, the effective period as to when that document is valid for, as well as all the additional functionalities if he needs to make any changes to the information that he already entered. The third document is going to be the individual narrative. Let's take a look at what that looks like with Angela here. Once again, she's a case manager and she's going to click Add to begin that individual narrative document. She enters her effective from and to dates and clicks Continue. The first screen that Angela sees on this document is going to be the great things about me. This whole document is going to be really geared towards gaining a better understanding of the specific individual and their overall goals. So you'll see quite a few questions throughout. That really help to get to know the individual, hopefully to set up a better plan of care for them. Next, Angela sees the What is important to me screen. She's going to answer any, must ask the individual and record all of their answers about many of the different things that are important to them during their time of care. Angela clicks Continue, and she sees this What is important for me screen. She can continue to record the individual's responses throughout this document. Next is going to be the What is the characteristics of the people who support me best screen. This will help pair the individual with a caregiver who's best going to support their needs. And going along with that, we have what others need to know or do to support me and help me to stay healthy and safe. So once again, this is just going to go along with asking many questions to help improve the quality of care that that specific individual receives. Next, we have the things to figure out screen. Gives the individual a chance to talk about some of the current challenges they've been facing and factors that have been holding them back. So hopefully Angela can help them work through some of those challenges. Angela's then going to ask the individual about what's going well in their life and different things they'd like to improve. And finally, we have the support screen. Asks about the type of supports that the individual desires and needs in order to be successful while they are receiving care. So once Angela's asked all of these individual narrative questions and completed all of the necessary screens, she'll once again see this individual data entry main menu screen where she can see that her document has been submitted. Finally, we're going to take a look at this medical information document, the fourth and final ADD document for today's session. We're going to have Ernie, and he's a case manager. He is going to work us through this specific document. So he goes ahead and enters the effective from and to dates, and then he's going to click continue to get started. Ernie sees this allergy screen that we saw in the first crisis prevention and risk mitigation document. So once again, if any changes are made, Ernie is going to need to go back to that crisis prevention and risk mitigation document and manually update the same changes that he makes on this screen if he ends up making any changes. If not, he can go ahead and click continue. And next is going to be the health evaluation screen, where Ernie can record any health evaluations the individual has received recently. Next, he'll proceed to fill out the medical contacts, which is different from the emergency contacts that we discussed earlier. So this one will not need to be manually changed in a different document, but Ernie's going to go ahead and fill out all of the medical contact information that he has for the specific individual, click add, and then clicks continue. Next, he's going to enter any information he has about the physical assessment the physical assessment information that he has for the individual. And just a quick note on this screen, you can see that if the individual has not received any physical assessments recently, there is a no physical assessment checkbox that Ernie can check rather than filling out the information. He'll go ahead and click continue. And finally, we're going to see the supervision care needs, where he can see and enter any information about the supervision that the individual is going to need throughout their time of care, as well as any description or additional details that he has about the type of supervision needed. So this is the final screen on the medical information document. And wrapping things up for the specific document completion, we can see now that all 4 of our documents have been submitted into the accompanying data and documents on the individual data entry main menu screen. Ernie sees all of the submission dates as well as the period that each document is going to be effective for. Once again, if he needs to go back and make any changes, updates, or even print out these documents, he can do so on this screen here. So now that you know how all of the additional data and documents need to be completed, let's look at some of the additional functionalities and different notifications that you probably saw as we were working through those documents themselves. So the first is going to be an error message. If a user attempts to submit the plan of care before the required ADD documents have been submitted, this is what you're going to see here. So like I mentioned, all of the required ADD documents must be submitted before a plan of care can be submitted. And if that is not done, then this is what you're going to see at the top of your plan of care screen. So here we can see in the green box that it says, please add the sections crisis prevention and risk mitigation document, as well as medical information document. So this red bar is going to just indicate which documents you're missing and which must be submitted before you are able to submit the plan of care for a specific individual. So if you ever see that red bar, that's just going to notify you which documents you need to go and complete before you can actually proceed with the plan of care. Next is going to be the view history functionality. This was on many of the screens that we went through in different documents previously. This is just going to allow users to make any changes or view any changes, that have been made to a specific document. So by clicking this view history function in the bottom right-hand corner, it's going to open a pop-up window, which is going to display all of the history for that specific document. So we've got 2 screenshots here. Just please note with these 2 what they represent. So any changes made to a submitted document is going to display under the view history pop-up window. So that top screenshot there has been any edits made to submitted documents. If you have not submitted a complete ADD document, then any changes made to that draft version are not going to be captured under the view history screen. So you can see that there below that there are no records found, meaning that it's just a draft version and the final version of that document has not yet been submitted. Next, we have the deleting records functionality. This is very similar to the view history that we just looked at on the previous slide, but the deleted records post-document submission will be displayed in the view deleted records checkbox. You can see here on screens that where a user can view multiple records, they can also delete a record and view any records that were previously deleted. So by clicking this view deleted records checkbox over here on the right side, you can see that all of the past known allergies popped up. These have been previously deleted, but you can still select specific entries made in the past and view them if need be. Next, we'll look at the editing ADD documents functionality as well as the add documents functionality. Users are able to edit specific accompanying data and documents that have been previously entered after they have been submitted by using this function. This is on that individual data entry main menu screen. So once the document has been submitted, you use this edit button to go back and change any information that you may need to. And just a quick note before we move on, that each ADD document section is only valid for the effective period, which is typically the LOC period that was entered when the document was added initially. So when that effective period is over, the user is going to have to enter each required ADD document again by selecting add in each required section. We'll take a look at what that looks like next. So this add function is going to help with copying different ADD documents. So there's going to be situations where different fields within an ADD document may not be required to be updated. Nothing about that information changed for the individual. So it's not really efficient to go back and re-enter it all over again. So by using this add function, users, you all, are going to be able to copy the information from the previous ADD document into the new document. And this is how that's going to look. So once you click the add function, MWMA is going to send you a pop-up window, and that's just going to let you know that you're adding a new document and ask if you want to copy the information over from the previous document. So you're going to want to click yes. Once again, you'll have to enter those effective to and from dates for the new document. But then you'll see here that the information from the past document has been copied over into the new document. And you're going to see this message up here, as well as a checkbox that asks you to confirm that you have reviewed all of the copied information, ensured its accuracy, and made any necessary changes. So just keep in mind that if you do select yes and you want to copy this information over, you are required to review it all, make any necessary changes, and just essentially confirm that you have reviewed the entire document and all of its information for accuracy. Once you've done that, just go ahead and click that checkbox and you can proceed with your new document. All right, so that wraps up our content that I'm going to cover today. We have Alicia Clark here with us, and she is going to be doing the Q&A session for today's webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Alicia to answer all the questions. And if you guys have any additional questions, please feel free to go ahead and post those in the Q&A session. So hopefully we can address them for you now.
Thanks, Boyd. My name is Alicia Clark, and I am the Assistant Director of the Division of Community Alternatives. I'm here with you today, along with the rest of the great team that we have with Deloitte and our Oats folks, and also our sister agencies, to hopefully help answer any questions that you have. And I'll go ahead and get started with the ones that are in the chat. And I know some of these have already been answered throughout the webinar, but if you don't have access to TRIS, it is very, very important that you get access to TRIS. This is where we post our QRGs, different trainings, all of that. So I'm going to ask Amy, who is one of our Oats team members, if she will put in the information about getting access to TRIS if you don't have it. So just to kind of start with that. Another thing I would like to just start with is I know we probably have a large audience on here that serves different waivers. And when we think about creating a system for 6 different waivers, which have 6 possibly different requirements, it does become a difficult task, to say the least, because not all of our waivers are streamlined. We are working toward that, in the future as we move forward. But as you know, things can't happen overnight. It seems like any changes that are made takes a really long time. So some of these questions you might have, that, it doesn't make sense to you because it might not really apply to the specific waiver that you're doing, but I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. And as always, if you have very specific waiver questions, I really encourage you to reach out to your operating agency. If you don't know who that is, you can let me know. But the people that come and audit you, that's going to be your operating agencies. And we're here to help. And like with SEL and Michelle P. Waiver, they have QAs within their operating agency that you might be assigned a specific QA. Don't hesitate to reach out to them. Like I said, we're all here to help you all as we move forward. So I'll get started with some of the questions. Somebody says, why does it ask why someone doesn't have a behavior plan if there is not, okay, never mind. Okay, here we go. Sorry, it jumbled on me when somebody else put a question in. Why does it ask why someone doesn't have a behavior plan if there is not one? So in some of our waivers, behavior is not a service. So we have behavior supports is a service in some of them, but not in all. So if they don't have a behavior support plan, you can mark that. It might be that you're going to put in there as a note is behaviors is not a service within your waiver. And just because you are in a specific waiver that offers behavior supports as a service doesn't mean that everybody's going to have behaviors. And it's okay to write that there are no behaviors. Now, if you start thinking, and I've come across this in reviewing plans and looking at different issues people have when, we're trying to figure out what do we need to do with this person? They're not getting services. They've maybe ran some caregivers off. They've done all this stuff. And you can see that they're having behaviors. So one of my first questions is a lot of times, well, if they're having behaviors, then what can we do to wrap around them as, an overall holistic approach? Because it is a service offered in the scenarios that I'm talking about. It's offered in that specific waiver. So I start asking the questions, well, if they're having all these behaviors, is that a service that we need to look at to get for them, to assist them in their daily lives? So, think about that as you're like, oh, well, no, but yet they've got behaviors. Then what do we need to do? Do we need to, recommend that? Somebody asked, what waiver does the transition plan? So I think what the question is, is the transition plan required? No, it is not required in order to submit a plan of care. Now, the transition plan is very useful when you are serving those waivers in which we are supporting them in the least restrictive setting. So they might have started let's just talk about SEL. They might have started in a residential level 1. Now they went to a residential level 2 and maybe to a technology. And then the ultimate goal for this participant may be to live in their own apartment. You can start filling that out and then looking and writing down what is going to be needed to successfully support them in the least restrictive setting in the community. So again, it's not required, but anytime you are transitioning people over time, you can use that. Somebody asked to please provide clarification about what waiver requires manually updating to the transition plan. Is this only for ABI waivers or for all waivers? And I think we kind of answered that. If you feel that that didn't answer your question, then please reach out to the ABI waiver group, and they will be more than happy to assist you further. What would be the correct information to enter for the medical information and system information? So depending kind of on what, you know, they could have had a sick visit, right? And they went in for a sick visit, let's say strep throat, and you can put that in there. You know, if it was a primary care visit, they might go and see a pulmonologist that is truly just a pulmonary appointment. So it could be just a PCP, and you can just put in there an overall yearly annual physical in there. So it kind of just depends on what individual that they're seeing. So there's really no, I don't want to say that there's a wrong or right answer to that question. Somebody also has asked, who would have a behavior support plan and how would a case manager know if a client has one? Is this something that the adult daycare would have on file? So this may have been asked by somebody who possibly serves HCB, where HCB does not have behavioral services as a service. So they wouldn't have that. As a case manager, if you are serving a waiver that has behavior supports, then you are the one that's actually requesting that and putting that information within the uploaded documents in order to get what's needed approved through the plan of care. So as a case manager, you should know if you're still in question, and I haven't, you know, because I don't have exactly who is serving what waivers and all of that. So I'm trying to answer it very generally. Don't hesitate to reach out so that we make sure that we do answer that question. Somebody has asked for some examples of rights restrictions. You know, anytime that you are restricting a participant's movement, their access to maybe a certain activity or a location, that's going to be a rights restriction that's got to go through a process. So some of those might be, you know, it could be to alcohol, it could be to cigarettes, it could be to for some unsupervised computer access because they've been doing things on the computer that would not be appropriate. You know, if they have maybe a health related issue to where you are having to restrict some foods. So anything like that. I mean, there's really numerous examples that you could really talk about. But anytime you are restricting somebody from something, or a person, even if you're restricting them from a specific person, that would be a rights restriction.
Is it okay if I jump in just for a moment, Alicia?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And Kathy's on here with SCL and Michelle P. Waiver, and so she might be able to provide some of the more common ones that they see as well.
Well, I was just really going to say that rights restrictions are explained and dealt with in regulations. So it's really follow whichever waiver you're involved in, what your waiver, what your regulations state about rights restrictions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kathy. Yes, there's like a huge piece like in the SCL reg about the rights restrictions and them having to go through the Human Rights Committee and then behaviors with the BIC committee and all of that. So thank you for the additional information there. Somebody has asked, how would you add a picture to the ADD module if it's using to replace the participant summary? So let me just kind of talk about SCL for just a second. And again, Kathy might jump in if needed, but we are going to take that back. Right now, you can upload a picture to MWMA. If you are putting everything in there that is a requirement, then you don't have to upload that additional document in the MWMA, the document section. However, there are a couple required pieces in regulation that as an SCL provider that you're going to need to upload. That's going to be like your yearly physicals and your HRST. That is going to need to be uploaded in the document section. As far as the participant summary, if you have included everything in that individual narrative, everything that's required for that piece, then it's not necessary that you upload that additional documentation. But with like the photo that's required, you can upload that into MWMA. And I can't remember if I said this or not, but we are going to, that's one thing that we will look at about the possibility of maybe, adding a link there or something in the future, in labeling it as picture or something like that, especially for the waivers that require that. The next question is, what if I have an HCB client that is found to be on the state sex offender list? What does the case manager restrict from daycare? Does the case manager restrict from daycares? So if you are having, if you have that scenario, if you could send that in to us. Now, I think that it needs to be dealt with very carefully, but also, I'm going to go the law. If there's a law against something, then we have to look at that, because sometimes restrictions and court, the final court hearings, they might restrict something very specifically that we would have to look at. And I think that it would be handled on a case-by-case basis, just to make sure that we are following what we need to do on both sides of getting them services, but also making sure that they are not going against anything that is in the final report from the court. Another question is, sorry, there was one that came in and maybe pushed it down. Does the ADD documents need to be updated for modifications to the plan throughout the year, or is this an annual recertification? So I'm going to say it's an annual recertification. However, if there is very pertinent information that changes, so maybe there's a significant health crisis that occurs that needs to change. Maybe they gained a new shellfish allergy and it caused an anaphylactic reaction. I mean, that's something huge, right? We want to make sure that everybody who is providing services has access to that information and it's very easily attainable. If there is, I'm trying to think of, I wouldn't say you need to update it for every single little thing, but anything major, please make sure that we are updating that. Why is the majority of this information being requested the same questions that have already been answered in the documents we upload? It's additional work on the case managers to enter the same information repetitively. So if the information is put into here, then you don't have to upload information with that on it. Now, and I do understand we don't want repetitive work. The more we can use the system, the better off we are. And if you're not really into data, this probably doesn't mean a lot to you, but coming from the data side and being able to gather information for CMS, it's very, very important that we can actually pull data. You cannot pull data from a PDF document. It's impossible. And when you have 26,000 people on waivers, we have to answer to CMS on a lot of things. I know in the PowerPoint here, I cannot come across my words today. It must be almost Friday. The PowerPoint here, there's a link in there so that you all can look at the approved waiver applications. Somebody asked, well, why do we have to have a crisis plan? If you look in our approved waiver applications to CMS, we've basically assured them as a state that people will have backup plans, crisis plans in place. What about if a worker doesn't show up? You can't just leave. I mean, there's some participants that cannot be left alone, and there has to be a plan in place. So it's very, very important. And I would encourage you, if you have not read the approved waiver applications by CMS, that you click on that link. I think they also probably put it in the chat, that you read through those. They are very lengthy documents. That is one reason why it takes so long to get things approved with CMS, because we will go back and forth. You know, we go through it, we put it out for public comment, you all comment on it, we send it in, then CMS has comments, we go back and forth. So it's a very, very lengthy process, but it is what we have to do to assure that we continue to receive our federal reimbursement. As you all know, and you've probably heard me say it, 70% of it comes from federal reimbursement. So 70 cents of every dollar we get from them. And in order to keep our reimbursement for our members, then we have to do what we say that we're doing for them. And if we don't put things in there, they will not approve our waivers until we put certain things in there and different safeguards like that. If a person has a printout of their most recent medical visit from a doctor's office, can this be uploaded instead of manually entering each system and the result? So if you are putting, so for one, we need to put the information in the ADD document about their last visit. Now, if it's an overall general physical, you can put that information, and you can also even put a note in there that you have uploaded that as well. So that you don't have to write, you know, neuro, this, vascular, this, cardiac, you know, because it was an overall yearly physical. Somebody has also asked regarding the medical information. In the section labeled medical evaluations, based on the questions asked, I assume the intent is to document all the specialists the participant sees on a regular basis. For example, a neurologist they see routinely to help manage their seizures, or a cardiologist they see routinely for heart issues. This would not include a doctor a participant saw for routine exams such as a mammogram or a prostate exam, correct? In the physical, so let me start with that one. So anybody that they see routinely, we want in there. If, you know, and I think you're probably talking about the SCL, Michelle P. waiver folks for this one. Just make sure that if it's a physical examination that you are uploading that document per regulation. But you don't have to, you know, the more information we have, but like you said, if it's just a mammogram, you know, it's very, very important that all women who are a little bit older get those yearly. Now, if we notice something on that and, you know, maybe they had cancer and we started down that road, we would definitely want that information in there, because if something happens, you know, this is an easy place to get to, because I know in, you know, when adrenaline's going and things are kind of crazy for one sense or the other, sometimes it's like, well, who's your doctor? And then you go blank, right? Like, I don't know. So the more information, it's going to allow people, in case there is any issues, that we can make sure that we have the right people involved. The next part of that question is, in the physical assessment section, what information are you looking for in the description? Please be specific, as case managers are not medically training or accustomed to summarizing a physical assessment. So if it's just a normal, like, yearly physical assessment, you can just put in there, you know, this is the doctor they saw and it's a yearly physical assessment. And then if you have that information, you know, especially for our HCB folks, that it isn't required in regulation that you have to upload that. If they've got a printout, you can take that, upload that if you want to, and so that, you know, it's in the system. The next part of this question is, next is the supervised care needs. Is this intended to replace the level of supervision currently in the participant summary? In this section, there is an opting to the note if a supervised care level has intense supervision or not. Is this referencing exceptional supports? If not, what does? So Joseph, let me go back and take a look at that part in there, unless Kathy, if you are close to that section. But if not, I can take that back and then I can follow up with you on that. Okay, somebody asked, would it be possible to restore the participant summary as a document type? Many of our case managers documents are much more thorough than the CPPRM section of the ADD, and it would be much easier to just upload the participant summary. Again, we are trying to get as much information in the system as possible. If there are areas that you think that we need to add into our participant summary, we are more than open to listening to those. We also, because I know there was some clarification done to some of the questions.
Do you mind if I jump in, Alicia? I'm
Yeah.
sorry for interrupting you. I think the question, so the participant summary used to be a drop down that they could choose for uploading. And when there were changes to the drop down choices, that was removed. So this question is asking if it could be restored.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So they're just asking about the participant summary as a document type itself.
Yes.
Okay. Did we, Kathy or Andy, one of the Deloitte folks, I don't remember if we got rid of that. I feel like that there would have been something that would have, because not everybody calls it a participant summary. And so is there something that it would work across all waivers that we then kind of made that heading for?
I just recall in the decision-making, it was because it was only used by one.
By one. And I think that's because, again, when you are designing a system, it's sometimes it's hard because we are not always consistent across waivers, but I feel like that there was a discussion around that. And but I will go back and I can have the team pull that information for us and just take a look at that. Because again, we are trying to use the system and make it beneficial for all waivers. Thank you, Kathy. I obviously misread that.
That's fine.
Okay, another question is, in the physical assessment section, what information are you all looking for in the description? Please be, oh, I thought did that come in twice or did I not? I think that must have come in twice. Okay. It would be more beneficial if they let the agency fill out the medical form due to the case managers not having access to all the medical information, but the agency does. We look at the physical note from the agency and it does not have the doctor's name, phone number, address. It has a doctor's signature that you can't read. We are having to ask the agency what the doctor's names are and then look up this information on the internet. So right now we do not have they do not have the capability, as this is part of the case manager's functionality, to actually go in and manipulate this module within MWMA. Okay.
Alicia, I just got confirmation that we did remove the participant summary.
Is it called something else now?
No, that one was just removed.
Okay, so can we just put that on a list to take back?
Yep, will do.
And then if we could also look at I remember there being kind of a crosswalk or where we looked at, what was and what was going to be. And so that would just be helpful as we look at that.
And there's also a couple of questions that have come in the chat that you might want
to. Okay, sorry, let me go over here. I'm gonna have to make that bigger. Hold on just a second. Okay. So I think one question would be, should the primary providers be start uploading the HRSTs and the annual exams now that they have access to MWMA? Kathy, do you want to take this one, or would you like for me to take this one? Kathy may be on mute.
I'm sorry, I had to. So yes, now that all of the other providers do have access to MWMA, it does make sense for those who initially get those documents that they be the ones to upload them instead of getting it to the case manager and then having the case manager do that.
Thank you, Kathy. Amy, also, I can see that she put in here about the MWMA trainings that are all the information that's on TRIS. So if you do not have access to TRIS, and I'm telling you all, I will go back. If there's a piece of MWMA that I've not used in several months because I've been focused on a different project, I even pull these QRGs that you all would use and to go through something. They are very, very useful. I cannot tell you enough. I mean, we've had a great team over the last few years working on these, and if you're not using them, you definitely should be. Let's see, am I missing? Sorry, that's why we always do the Q&A, just so we don't miss anything. The chat kind of gets jumbled up trying to go back through it. I think that was all in there. Andy, so if you did put something in the chat and I did not answer it, then don't hesitate to put it over here in the QA. Somebody did have just one more statement. They said that they felt like the narrative has some repetitive questions. If you want to send those in to the Medicaid public comment box about where you feel that some things are repetitive, if it's, let us know. We can definitely take a look at that.
Yep, and I'd like to jump in and just answer a question we've gotten 3 or 4 times today.
Yes.
It's about copying the information in the ADD document. That functionality was recently added, like last November, end of last November. And around that time, we also revised the questions in the ADD documents. And so in order to copy, it's going to be about a year or so before you have that option, really. So first, you'll fill out the ADD documents the first time around since they've been revised. And then when it comes around to your next reassessment for that individual, at that time, MWMA is going to give you an option, ask if you'd like to copy from the previous year's documents. Obviously, it's not going to let you copy from an older something before November 2020 because the questions were revised after that time. So it has to be something that was document that was created after that time, after November 2020. So hopefully that helps. You'll see that option in the future, but I know in the meantime, it's a little bit of extra entry that you may need to do, but eventually that copy feature will help you out.
Thank you, Andy. As of right now, oh, wait a minute, this might be new. I've got one of them that I'm keeping outstanding to go back and check on. Let's see. I completed an SCL recertification last week. When entering the same information on there, previously it did not offer the option to copy information from last year. I had to copy and paste anything that didn't change. Was this copy function to add very recently? Okay, I think that's kind of what you talked about, Andy.
Yep, that's the one I was looking at.
Yep. Okay, let me put that one here. Okay. I try to get rid of them as I answer them where they jump around there. So, first of all, I appreciate everybody joining us today. There really hasn't been any changes, but I do know that some people were kind of concerned on, and maybe they hadn't been really doing this in the system. There may have been some crisis backup plans that were outside of the system, but the question was kind of like, well, why do we have to do these now? And the short of it is CMS basically requires us through that approved waiver application. So, that's one reason why it is now a required document for anyone submitting that plan of care. And then somebody said, he said something about the information, the ADD being duplicative on the participant summary. I may have misheard or misunderstood. Is he just saying the participant summary isn't required?
Regulation for SEL states that a participant summary is required, but it doesn't say like it has to be a separate document titled participant summary. So if we're not trying to make it be less detailed, less information than you had been providing in participant summary. But what we're trying to allow for is if you want to use the ADD module, you can use it as the participant summary. Just make sure you put all the information. Some of the screens might not ask for the information that you usually have put it wherever it makes the most sense to put it.
And Kathy, they can put it right there in that individual narrative or if it, throughout that, anywhere in that document, the ADD, whether it be the medical information.
The point that I want to make sure is understood is that that's not meant to limit you to only answer the specific question that's the questions that are there on the screen. If you're wanting to not do a separate participant summary, you can do it separate, but it's so that if you're wanting to streamline, don't want to enter information more than one place, you can utilize the ADD module for that.
Thank you, Kathy. Sorry, every once in a while I get unstable internet connection. It seems to be really pouring at my house right now. So hopefully the rain will get over soon. There doesn't, and let me know or yell at Andy or Kathy or anybody if you're not being able to hear me. But again, I appreciate you all attending today. I hope this has been helpful, especially for, some of the providers who may have not been used to putting all this information in the system. There was no really changes. Because we were getting some questions, especially from our HCB providers, that we really just wanted to put this out, but also allow that for everybody to join in and just if they had any specific questions. So I don't want to keep you all on here. I know everybody's days are packed full. But we will be here for a few more minutes. I do know I'm going to let Boyd go ahead and close us out because he has a request before you all leave today in order to assist us in making trainings better. So I will let him finish out and then I will be here for a few more minutes. If you all have any questions, please also reach out to your operating agency, as we are truly here to be partners with you and to help you. And to help our participants, succeed, in the future. So I appreciate it. Thank you all.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alicia and Andy and Kathy, for answering all those questions. We'll go ahead and wrap things up here. I know Alicia mentioned briefly this QRG. So following today's session, if you do have any additional questions as to the ADD functionality in MWMA, or really any of the other functionality, with a lot of the different modules within MWMA, we have a lot of useful QRGs, quick reference guides for you all to take advantage of. And those are going to be located on TRIS. We'll also be posting and sending out the slide deck from today, as well as a recording of the webinar for you to access in the future if you need to reference any of the materials that we covered. Like I mentioned earlier, we do have a evaluation survey. My co-host Hannah is going to go ahead and post this in the chat box. If y'all wouldn't mind to take the next 2 to 3 to 5 minutes to fill this out for us, we'd really appreciate any feedback. You'll also have the chance to post any additional questions that you may have, and hopefully we can acknowledge those in the future. We'll definitely take advantage of any feedback you can provide to make all of these trainings better and more efficient for you guys down the road. We really appreciate you guys coming out and joining this accompanying data and documents training, and we hope to see you all again in the near future. Have a good day. Thanks.